The sky cracked open with an unnatural shimmer. One moment, the world was bathed in the familiar hum of city life. Car horns blaring, people chattering, the distant echo of machinery churning. The next, there was silence. Not just any silence, but an eerie, oppressive vacuum, as if the universe itself had taken a breath and forgotten to exhale. Above Earth, the arrival had begun. Massive obsidian structures descended from the heavens, blotting out the sun. They didn't roar, didn't shimmer with light or pulse with energy. They simply arrived, defying gravity, drifting down like leaves on an invisible wind. The largest hovered ominously over Washington, D.C., casting a shadow so vast it turned midday into twilight. Others positioned themselves over major cities: Moscow, Beijing, London, Tokyo, Johannesburg. And still there was no sound. Lieutenant Colonel Aaron Hayes stood at the edge of the Pentagon's war room, staring at the live satellite feed. It made no sense. Alien ships had arrived, but there were no broadcasts, no threats, no demands, no electromagnetic signals of any kind. Even radio waves seemed to vanish into void around them. Any response? General Peterson's voice was gruff, clipped, but laced with tension. "Nothing, sir," came the reply from a communications officer. No signals, no movement. They're just there. That was the terrifying part. They weren't attacking, weren't speaking, weren't acknowledging anything. The ships had simply appeared, massive and indifferent. It was as if humanity had been put under a microscope, a specimen being observed. Then, as if to confirm that chilling thought, people started falling. It began subtly. Passers-by in Times Square simply dropping mid-stride. A mother pushing a stroller crumpling like a puppet with severed strings. A businessman adjusting his tie, then face-planting onto the pavement. Across the world, it spread like a ripple, like a silent, unseen wave sweeping through the most populated areas. No screams, no struggle, just collapse. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered in the war room. Hayes felt his pulse hammering as he watched the numbers climb on the live death counter. Thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions. Are they targeting specific people? Peterson barked. "No pattern, sir," an analyst said, voice shaking. "It's random. Old, young, rich, poor, anyone. Except us," Hayes muttered. The war room fell into a heavy silence as the realization settled in. The Pentagon, along with every military base, was unaffected. Remote locations, underground bunkers, ships at sea. Everyone still stood, breathing, heartbeat steady. It wasn't just an attack. It was selection. And for the first time in human history, the enemy hadn't come with weapons. They had come with silence. But humanity wasn't going to go down without a fight. Panic spread like wildfire, but there was no enemy to fight, no voice to plead with. The streets of major cities were littered with bodies, unmoving, untouched. The world had fallen into a quiet, suffocating horror. At the Pentagon, the silence in the war room was broken only by the frantic keystrokes of intelligence officers and the occasional hushed curse. No one could process what was happening. It wasn't a virus. It wasn't radiation. It wasn't a weapon they could see. "We have to retaliate," General Peterson said, jaw clenched so tightly the muscles twitched. "If they're selecting who lives and who dies, we need to show them we won't just stand by." "Retaliate with what?" Hayes asked, shaking his head. "We can't even detect them. We can't communicate with them. We don't know how they're doing this." "I don't care," Peterson snapped. "We have nukes. We have orbital weapons. We hit them with everything we've got." Hayes hesitated. Something felt wrong. This wasn't a standard invasion. There were no explosions, no battleships opening fire. The aliens weren't even engaging with their weapons. They had come in silence, killed in silence, and now they were waiting. What were they waiting for? "Sir," a trembling voice called from the intelligence station. "We've got something on the satellites." The screen shifted to a high-altitude feed. One of the alien ships hovered over New York City, unmoving, but now something was happening to the ground beneath it. The air rippled, a strange distortion bending the light. Then, in a slow, surreal motion, the bodies began to rise. Not all of them, just some. Some of the fallen lifted into the air like weightless puppets, their limbs hanging limp, their heads lolling to the side. They weren't conscious, weren't struggling. They simply ascended. "Where the hell are they taking them?" someone murmured. Hayes's got twisted. It wasn't random. The people who remained on the ground, the ones who weren't taken, were young children, a handful of elderly, a few middle-aged civilians. But most of the ones being lifted into the air were between 20 and 50, the prime years of adulthood. "They're taking the strongest," Hayes whispered, the realization dawning like a slow, creeping nightmare. "For what?" The silence deepened. Then the radios crackled, the first sound since the arrival. A single voice called indifferent. "You are unworthy." The words echoed across every frequency, every channel, every device that could transmit sound. It was everywhere at once, a voice from nowhere and everywhere. The world held its breath. Hayes clenched his fists. "The hell we are," he muttered. And at that moment, he swore humanity would prove them wrong. The silence that followed that message was worse than the message itself. "You are unworthy." The words lingered in the air like an aftershock, digging into the minds of every surviving human. The war room at the Pentagon was frozen. The screen still showed bodies rising into the sky, disappearing into the dark monolithic alien ships. The rest of the world could only watch in helpless horror. "We need to move now," General Peterson barked, snapping everyone out of their trance. "If they think we're unworthy, we show them otherwise. Mobilize every fighter jet, every drone, every missile we have. I want a full assault on those ships before they finish whatever the hell they're doing." "But what if attacking makes it worse?" someone asked. "Worse." Peterson spat. "Look at the damn screen. We don't even know if those people are alive." Hayes felt cold. He knew Peterson was right, but something about this still didn't make sense. If the aliens wanted them dead, they could have wiped the planet clean in seconds. But they hadn't. They had chosen. And that terrified him more than a full-scale invasion ever could. "Sir," a comms officer said, voice tight, "we're detecting activity from the International Space Station." Hayes frowned. The ISS? A new screen blinked to life. The station was still in orbit, but its cameras had caught something horrifying. A second wave of ships, smaller, needle-like, were descending from the mother ships. Not attacking, not bombing. Harvesting. The smaller ships extended thin, whip-like tendrils, dragging entire buildings upward. Skyscrapers, vehicles, infrastructure. Anything and everything deemed useful was being taken. "They aren't just taking people," Hayes said slowly. "It's acquisition. We're not fighting an army. We're being processed." Another analyst whispered. The room went deathly still. Then the first missile was launched from an undisclosed military base. An intercontinental ballistic missile streaked toward the ship over Washington, D.C. It hit its target dead center, detonating with enough force to level the city. The shock wave shattered windows, rocked buildings, and sent a fireball stretching into the sky. For a moment, there was hope, and then the fire dissipated. The ship remained untouched, unbothered, unmoved. "Oh, God," someone muttered. Before anyone could process what had happened, the ship responded. It was instant. It was merciless. From the ship's surface, a pulse of light rippled outward, sweeping across the entire city like a wave. Wherever it touched, people simply vanished. No scream, no resistance. One moment they existed, and the next they were gone. The Pentagon's feed cut out. Washington, D.C. had been silenced. The war room erupted into chaos. People shouting commands, overlapping, soldiers gripping their weapons as if that would make a difference. But Hayes barely heard any of it. His mind was racing. This wasn't war. This wasn't conquest. This was judgment. And humanity was failing. But if the aliens thought they were unworthy, then humanity had no choice but to prove them wrong. The world fell into chaos, but it wasn't the chaos of war. It was something worse. Helplessness. For the first time in human history, the enemy wasn't something they could bomb, shoot, or negotiate with. The ships loomed overhead, their presence as indifferent as gods watching from heavens. Washington, D.C. was gone, wiped from existence in the blink of an eye. The other ships hadn't moved, hadn't retaliated further. They simply continued their quiet harvest, selecting their chosen ones while stripping the planet of its resources. At the Pentagon, the war room was in freefall. D.C. is gone, a technician screamed, voice raw with disbelief. Not destroyed, gone. There's nothing left. No debris, no radiation, no bodies. Nothing. Hayes gritted his teeth, his mind working faster than it ever had before. The aliens didn't just erase the people in Washington. They erased the city, as if it had never existed. No wreckage, no ruins. Just empty earth where the Capitol once stood. General Peterson slammed his fist against the table. I want every military branch ready to fire. We hit them with everything we've got. Orbital strikes, cyber warfare, biochemical. That won't work, Hayes interrupted, his voice sharper than he intended. The war room went silent. You saw what happened. They didn't just survive the missile. They ignored it. And when we attacked, they reacted like we were insects in their way. We're not at war. We're being discarded. Peterson's nostrils flared, but he didn't argue. He couldn't. The evidence was on every screen in the room. The aliens weren't attacking cities. They were culling populations with surgical precision. And now they had erased Washington, as if it were nothing more than an afterthought. We need to change tactics, Hayes continued. They don't see us as a threat. That's our only advantage. We need to figure out why they're doing this and how they're choosing who lives and who dies. Peterson exhaled through his nose, hands balled into fists. And how the hell do we do that? Walk up and ask them? No, Hayes said. We observe them the same way they're observing us. A tense silence followed. Then someone spoke up. Sir, one of the intelligence officers said, his face pale. We might have a way. All eyes turned to him. He gulped but continued. NORAD picked up a small anomaly about an hour before the arrival. It wasn't one of the ships. It was something else. A signal, a single frequency buried beneath normal radiation levels. We thought it was just background noise at first, but it's identical to the energy signature coming from the ships. Where was the signal coming from? Hayes asked. The analyst hesitated. Antarctica. The room went silent again. Antarctica, one of the last untouched frontiers of Earth. No major cities, no significant military presence. Just ice, isolation, and whatever secrets have been buried there for millennia. Hayes and Peterson locked eyes. It was their only lead. Peterson exhaled sharply and turned to his officers. Give me a task force. Black Ops only. No comms, no electronic signals. If we're going in cold. Hayes nodded. He was already running through the possibilities in his head. If the signal was tied to the ships, it could be their first real chance to understand the enemy. Maybe even their only chance. Because if humanity didn't figure out what was happening soon, there wouldn't be anyone left to fight back. The flight to Antarctica was as quiet as the skies themselves. Hayes sat in the cargo hold of the stealth transport, surrounded by a team of 12 elite operatives. No insignia, no names, just trained ghosts moving without a trace. Outside, the world had gone deathly still. Major cities were abandoned, their streets filled with the fallen. The alien ships hung over them, unmoving, silent. The selection process continued, and no one knew how long it would last. The pilot's voice crackled in his earpiece. 2 minutes out. Hayes glanced at the team. Weapons check. Remember, if these things can erase cities, our firepower is worthless. We're here to gather intel, not pick a fight. The soldiers nodded. They all knew what was at stake. As they broke through the Antarctic storm, the landscape came into view, a barren wasteland of ice and snow. But in the middle of the frozen nothingness, something stood out. A structure. It wasn't alien. It wasn't human, either. It was old. Massive dark stone jutted from the ice, arranged in unnatural formations. Some of the slabs had collapsed. Others remained standing. It looked like ruins. But ruins of what? Then the scanner pinged. The same energy signature as the alien ships. Hayes felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Touchdown in 30 seconds, the pilot announced. Hayes tightened his grip on his rifle. They had come looking for answers, but some answers were better left undiscovered. The transport touched down on the ice with a muffled thud, the landing as smooth and silent as the world around them. Even the storm seemed hesitant to make noise, the wind howling just faintly enough to remind them that they weren't alone. Hayes unstrapped his harness and stood. The rest of the team was already moving, their training evident in the seamless efficiency of their actions. No wasted movements, no hesitation. They knew the stakes. The moment the ramp lowered, the cold slammed into them like a physical force. The temperature was lethal, minus 60 degrees Celsius at least, but their thermal suits kept them functional. They moved in a tight formation, rifles at the ready, eyes scanning the ruins ahead. Up close, the structures were even more unsettling. The dark stone formations weren't natural. They were designed. Massive slabs jutted out of the ice at odd angles, some still half-buried, others towering overhead like the rib cage of some long-dead beast. Strange, intricate carvings ran along the surfaces, worn down by time, but still distinct. Picking up a strong frequency, one of the team members muttered, checking his scanner. Same as the ship's. It's coming from below us. Hayes nodded. He had expected that. There's got to be an entrance somewhere. Spread out. Look for anything that resembles a passage. The team fanned out, their boots crunching softly against the ice. The ruins weren't just old, they were ancient. Hayes could feel it in his bones. This place had been buried for eons, hidden beneath Antarctica's frozen grip. But the question was, who built it? And why was it emitting the same energy signature as the alien ships? Over here! One of the soldiers, Calloway, waved them over to a massive, partially collapsed archway. The ice had cracked around it, revealing a dark tunnel leading deep underground. A cold draft whispered out, sending a chill through Hayes' spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. This is it, Calloway said. Looks man-made. Not man-made. Another soldier corrected. Something made. Hayes took point, leading them inside. The walls were smooth, unnaturally so, like they had been carved with precision far beyond human capability. The deeper they went, the more intricate the carvings became. Strange symbols, patterns that didn't belong to any known language. They weren't random. They had meaning. Then the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. The moment Hayes stepped inside, his breath caught in his throat. The room was massive, the ceiling vanishing into darkness above them. Strange obelisk-like structures dotted the space, some intact, others shattered into pieces. But at the center of it all was the source of the signal. A machine. It was massive, embedded into the very rock itself, pulsating with a faint, eerie glow. And it was alive. The team froze. No one spoke. No one dared to breathe too loudly. Hayes stepped forward cautiously. The machine wasn't just running. It was broadcasting. "Sir," Calloway whispered, "this thing's doing something." Hayes pulled out a small scanner and pointed it at the machine. The readings were off the charts, but something else stood out, a data stream. "It's sending a message," he murmured. "To the ships?" Hayes shook his head, his pulse quickening as he deciphered the data. It wasn't being sent to the alien ships above. It was being sent outward, beyond Earth, beyond the solar system. It was calling for something else, and something was calling back. Then the machine's glow intensified. The signal changed, and the ruins around them started to shake. The tremor started as a low vibration beneath their feet, subtle but unmistakable. Dust and ice shook loose from the cavern ceiling, drifting down like snow in the dim, eerie glow of the machine. The pulsating hum grew louder, more insistent. "Sir, we need to pull back," Calloway said, gripping his rifle tighter. "Whatever this thing is, it's waking up." Hayes didn't respond immediately. His eyes were locked on the machine, on the shifting patterns of light running along its surface. It wasn't just broadcasting, it was responding. But to what? A cold realization crept into his mind. The alien ships had come in silence, selecting their chosen and erasing the rest. They had judged humanity as unworthy. But this machine, it was older than them. It had been here long before humanity even existed, and it was still transmitting, which meant the ships hadn't come here on their own. They had been summoned. "Move!" Hayes barked, snapping out of his trance. "We need to get out of here now." The team didn't hesitate. They turned, moving quickly back towards the tunnel entrance. But the ground lurched violently beneath them, a deep mechanical groan echoing through the chamber as if the machine itself were alive and in pain. The walls cracked, and suddenly the tunnel behind them collapsed in an explosion of ice and stone. They were trapped. Calloway swore, spinning around. Alternative exit? None. Another soldier said grimly. That was our way out. Hayes's mind raced. They were underground in an alien ruin, and a machine older than civilization itself was waking up. Above them, the ships were still watching, still waiting, and now they had no escape. He turned back to the machine. If it had the power to send a signal beyond the stars, maybe, just maybe, it had the power to do something else. "Cover me," Hayes ordered. He stepped toward the machine, ignoring the instinctual fear crawling up his spine. Up close, the carvings looked almost organic, like veins running across the surface. He hesitated only a second before reaching out and placing his gloved hand against it. The reaction was immediate. A shock wave of energy blasted outward, knocking the entire team to the ground. A bright flash erupted from the machine's core, flooding the chamber with light. For a moment, Hayes was weightless, adrift in something vast and incomprehensible. Then the visions came. A planet vast and cold, its surface a graveyard of cities long abandoned, towering figures wrapped in obsidian armor, watching from shadows that stretched beyond the stars. A war, ancient and endless, fought between things that should not exist. And then Earth, humanity, a species that wasn't supposed to be here, a species that was never meant to evolve, a species that had been left behind when the true rulers of this world had vanished. Hayes gasped, stumbling back. The visions vanished, but the truth remained burned into his mind. "We're not the first," he whispered. The team stared at him, confused, but there was no time to explain. The machine's hum had reached a fever pitch, and Hayes knew without a doubt, that the alien ships had felt it. The ground above them cracked. Something massive was coming, and this time, the silence would not be their warning. The ice split apart with a deafening crack, a jagged rupture tearing through the ceiling above them. Dust and frozen shards rained down, forcing Hayes and his team to shield their faces as the ground trembled beneath them. The machine's glow intensified, pulsing like a beating heart, each pulse sending shock waves through the cavern. Then, from the widening fissure above, they descended. Dark, skeletal figures drifted downward, moving with an unnatural grace. Their bodies were elongated, their limbs too thin, too sharp. Their skin, or whatever passed for it, was smooth and black as if carved from obsidian. Their heads were featureless save for deep-set hollows where eyes should have been. They made no sound, not even a whisper of movement. The same silence that had heralded the arrival now filled the cavern. The first of the creatures touched the ground, its long fingers curling into the stone. Hayes raised his rifle instinctively, but he already knew bullets wouldn't matter. Nothing they carried would matter. Calloway aimed as well. "Orders?" he hissed, voice tight with panic. Hayes didn't answer. His mind was racing, piecing together the nightmare puzzle that had been unfolding since the ships arrived. The vision the machine had shown him wasn't just history. It was a warning. This planet had belonged to something else long before humanity ever crawled from the oceans, And now those things, whatever had ruled before, had returned. The aliens weren't invaders. They were custodians. And humanity had been judged as trespassers. The nearest creature took a slow step forward, its hollow eyes fixed on Hayes. It didn't raise a weapon, didn't threaten. It only watched, no, examined, evaluating. A terrible certainty settled in Hayes' gut. They weren't here to kill, not yet. They were here to make a decision, just like before. He lowered his rifle. Don't fire. Calloway stiffened. Sir, what? They're not attacking. They erased an entire goddamn city. Hayes didn't take his eyes off the creatures. Because we attacked first. The cavern trembled again. The machine pulsed, responding to the silent entities before it. Hayes realized with a sickening clarity that this moment, this exact moment, was another test, another silent judgment. If they fired, they wouldn't be fighting a battle. They would be proving their own unworthiness. One of the creatures raised a single clawed hand. A soft ripple of energy shimmered in the air. A question. Hayes took a slow breath. Then, against every instinct screaming at him, he stepped forward. The ripple intensified. The creature tilted its head, almost curious. Hayes' heart pounded. He could feel the weight of the moment crushing him. The survival of his team, maybe the survival of everyone left, depended on what he did next. So he did the only thing he could. He raised his own hand and touched the ripple. The world exploded. A surge of foreign thoughts, too vast and too alien to comprehend, flooded into his mind. Images, memories that weren't as poured into him, burning like fire. A species older than time. A war between forces so vast that entire galaxies have been collateral damage. A singular law etched into the very fabric of the universe. Only the strong survive. Hayes staggered back, gasping, his vision blurring. He felt like his mind had been dipped into something infinite, something impossible. The creature watching him tilted its head again, and then, for the first time, a sound broke the silence. A single word. Prove. The ground trembled one last time, and then, just as suddenly as they had arrived, the creatures vanished. The machine shut down, and the alien ships above began to move for the first time since their arrival. They weren't harvesting. They were waiting for humanity to make its choice. And Hayes understood. The test wasn't over. It had just begun. The tremor subsided, leaving only a deep, eerie stillness in the cavern. The machine had gone dark, its pulsing energy extinguished. The alien figures were gone as if they had never been there. But Hayes knew better. They weren't gone, they were watching. The weight of the word still rang in his skull. Prove. What the hell was that? Calloway hissed, still gripping his rifle, his knuckles white. Hayes took a shaky breath, trying to steady himself. A message? Calloway gave him a sharp look. A message? That's what you called that. He gestured to the cavern, to the dark, silent monolith that just tried to rewrite the inside of Hayes' skull. We're standing inside an alien ruin talking about species-old wars, and you think this is just a message? It's worse than that, Hayes murmured. He turned back to machine, still feeling the phantom weight of the visions it had forced into his mind. They're testing us. Always have been. Another soldier stepped forward. Corporal West, one of the quieter ones. Testing us for what? Hayes didn't answer immediately. The thoughts swirling in his mind weren't his own. He felt like he had glimpsed something too massive to truly comprehend. Like standing at the edge of a black hole, knowing it could consume everything with a single misstep. Only the strong survive. It wasn't a war doctrine. It wasn't a strategy. It was a law. The alien ships hadn't come to exterminate humanity out of hatred or conquest. They had come because they had the right to, because something in the universe had given them the authority to decide who was worthy of existence, and they had judged humanity as insufficient. We need to go, Hayes finally said, voice steady. Right now. But we're trapped. Hayes turned back toward the collapsed entrance, his pulse still hammering. He didn't know how he knew, but something in his gut told him they weren't trapped anymore. They were allowed to leave. "Try the signal," he ordered. "See if we can contact the transport." Wes hesitated, then tapped his wristcom. "Raven 1, do you copy?" A moment of static. Then, "Raven 1, this is Control. What's your status?" The entire team froze. That voice wasn't their pilot. It was coming from Washington, D.C., the city that had been erased. Hayes's blood ran cold. He grabbed the comm from Wes' hand. "Who is this?" A brief pause, then the voice came again. "You are out of time." The cavern exploded. A shock wave of pure force hurled Hayes and his team backward. The walls cracked, ice splitting apart as a machine behind them surged back to life. But this time, it wasn't broadcasting a message. It was activating something. Hayes hit the ground hard, his vision swimming. Alarms blared in his helmet, his suit compensating for the sudden atmospheric pressure shift. A deep, reverberating hum filled the cavern, vibrating through his bones. Calloway scrambled to his feet, his expression wild. "We need to go now." The ground beneath them shifted, and then they were falling. The ice gave way, the cavern collapsing beneath them, swallowing them into the darkness below. And in the last second before the abyss took them, Hayes heard again a whisper, a command, "Prove." And then there was nothing but darkness. The fall felt endless. Darkness swallowed them whole as they plunged into the abyss, their bodies twisting in freefall. Wind howled past Hayes' ears, but it wasn't natural wind. It carried a sound, something just beneath the range of human hearing. A whisper, a pulse, a voice that didn't use words. The team suits adjusted, micro-thrusters kicking in to slow their descent, but the void stretched on and on. Hayes caught flashes of movement around him, Wes flailing to stabilize himself, Calloway reaching for a handhold that didn't exist, the others swallowed in the black. Then light. It wasn't bright. It was a dull, pulsing glow from far below. Alien, unnatural, the same light the machine had emitted before it activated. It was coming up fast. Hayes barely had time to brace before impact. His boots hit solid ground with a bone-jarring thud, his knees buckling, the shock absorption in his suit, keeping his legs from breaking. Around him, the rest of the team crashed down one by one, rolling, grunting in pain. "Everyone check in," Hayes rasped, shaking his head to clear it. His helmet's HUD flickered, struggling to adjust to the dim light. West here, still breathing. "Calloway," another groaned. "Barely." One by one, the others reported in. No casualties, just bruises and confusion. Hayes exhaled in relief, but it was short-lived, because they were not alone. The chamber they had fallen into was vast, stretching out beyond the reach of their helmet lights. The pulsing glow came from massive structures, towers of black stone and metal arranged in a circular formation, like a ritual site. They hummed with energy, the air thick with an electric charge. And standing between those towers, watching them with hollow, glowing eyes, were hundreds of the creatures. Hayes froze. They weren't moving, weren't attacking. They were waiting. Calloway took a shaky step back. "Tell me we're not about to die." Hayes didn't answer. His mind was spinning. The vision, the machine, the message, the test, prove. This wasn't an execution. This was a trial. The realization sent a cold wave of understanding through him. The aliens had never planned to simply wipe out humanity. They had been choosing, selecting who lived and who vanished, not as extermination, but as correction. Humanity, in their eyes, had failed. And now Hayes and his team had been brought here not to be killed, but to be judged. The closest creature took a slow step forward, tilting its head in that unsettling, predatory way. Its voice, if it could even be called that, was layered deep, vibrating in the air like a ripple in reality itself. "One among you must speak." The team tensed. Calloway's breath hitched. What the hell does that mean? Hayes knew. He felt it the same way he had felt the machine calling to him. the same way the silence of the ships had pressed into his mind. He had already been touched by the vision. The choice was already made. He stepped forward. The creature's eyes burned brighter. The others around it shifted, their heads turning in unison, watching, measuring. Hayes swallowed hard. "I'm listening." The creature exhaled a sound that wasn't quite laughter. "Then you will see." And the world vanished in light. Hayes was somewhere else, not in the chamber, not on Earth, not anywhere. He was floating in a sea of stars, a vast emptiness stretching in all directions. But it wasn't empty. He could feel them, the architects, the silent watchers, the first rulers of Earth. They weren't alive in any human sense. They weren't dead, either. They had evolved beyond time, beyond space, beyond the limits of flesh and thought. And they had been waiting for the next species to rise, waiting for something worthy. Hayes saw flashes of civilizations before humanity. Races had come and gone, each wiped clean from the galaxy when they had failed to meet the architect's expectations. Now it was Earth's turn, and they were failing. The ships weren't here to conquer. They were here to decide. Humanity had been judged as weak, fractured, undeserving of the power they wielded. Their wars, their greed, their inability to unite, these things had marked them as inferior. And yet the architects had not erased them completely, because there was still a choice to be made. Hayes felt something pressing into his mind, something vast and incomprehensible. A challenge, a demand, a single, final question. Will you fight for your place? And Hayes knew this was it, the final test. If humanity proved itself, they would be allowed to remain. If they failed, they would be erased, not in fire, not in war, in silence. He took a deep breath, and then, with every ounce of defiance he had left, he answered, "Yes." The stars shattered, and Hayes woke up back in the chamber, back in his body, back on Earth. The creatures were still there, still waiting, but something had changed. The silence had shifted. The judgment was not over, but for the first time, humanity had been given a chance. Now, they had to prove they were worthy of it. The silence in the chamber felt different now. Not empty, not indifferent, but expectant. Hayes staggered his feet, his breath coming in sharp gasps. His body still felt disconnected, as if part of him had remained in that void between the stars. But he was here. He was alive, and they were still watching. The creatures, hundreds of them, stood motionless around the glowing towers, their hollow eyes burning into him. He could feel the weight of their gaze, of their judgment. His team was still frozen in place, their weapons useless in their hands, staring at him like he had just spoken to God. Maybe he had. Calloway finally found his voice. What the hell just happened? Hayes swallowed. How could he explain it? How could he put into words the immensity of what he had just experienced? The weight of 1 billion years of history pressing down on humanity like a vice. He turned to face the creatures, his heart hammering against his ribs. The weight of humanity's fate pressed upon him like a physical force. "They've given us a chance," Hayes said, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "One chance to prove we're worthy of survival." The nearest creature stepped forward, its obsidian form rippling like liquid shadow. When it spoke, the sound vibrated through Hayes's bones rather than his ears. "The trial begins now." The chamber floor beneath them shuddered and split open. Light erupted from the widening cracks. Not the alien glow of the towers, but sunlight. Real Earth sunlight streaming up from below. The team staggered back as the platform they stood on began to rise, carrying them upward through layers of ancient stone and ice. "Brace yourselves," Hayes shouted as they ascended rapidly toward the surface. The freezing Antarctic air hit them like a physical blow as they emerged into daylight. The platform locked into place, and Hayes's breath caught in his throat. They weren't in Antarctica anymore. The ruins around them had transformed, the black stone structures now forming a perfect circle on what appeared to be the National Mall in Washington, D.C., the city that had supposedly been erased. The alien ship still hovered overhead, casting their massive shadows. But the city itself was intact. Empty, silent, but intact. And surrounding them, standing in perfect stillness, were the fallen, thousands of human bodies, upright but motionless, eyes vacant, expressions blank, neither dead nor alive, suspended in some terrible in-between state. "What is this?" Wes whispered, horror etched across his face. Hayes understood with sickening clarity. "It's an arena." The nearest creature materialized beside Hayes, its hollow eyes fixed on the frozen humans surrounding them. "Your species divides itself," it said, the words resonating in Hayes's mind. "Nation against nation. Human against human. Such weakness cannot be permitted to continue." "We're not perfect," Hayes countered, "but we're not weak. We survived ice ages, plagues, wars." "You destroy yourselves," the creature interrupted. "Now prove you deserve to exist." The air shimmered, and suddenly a new image appeared. A massive holographic display floating above them all. It showed major cities around the world: Beijing, Moscow, London, Tokyo. In each location, a scene identical to theirs was unfolding. Military personnel, government officials, scientists, the ones who hadn't fallen, now stood in identical stone circles, surrounded by their frozen compatriots. "What's happening?" Calloway demanded. "The final test," Hayes realized aloud. "It's not just us. It's happening everywhere." The creature's voice rippled through the air. "Unite or perish." With those words, the frozen humans surrounding them began to move. Their eyes remained vacant, their movement mechanical, but they were advancing slowly, inexorably, toward the team. "Sir," West raised his rifle. "Orders." Hayes held up his hand. "Don't shoot. They're still people." "They're going to kill us," Calloway hissed. "No," Hayes said, the truth dawning on him. "They won't. That's not the test." The approaching humans weren't armed. They weren't aggressive. They were simply advancing, a tide of bodies moving with singular purpose. Hayes lowered his weapon completely and stepped toward the nearest creature. "This is what it's about, isn't it? Our willingness to destroy each other? You want to see if we'll kill our own to save ourselves." The creature remained silent, but Hayes knew he was right. The architects were testing humanity's greatest weakness, their division, their willingness to sacrifice others for self-preservation. "Listen to me." Hayes turned to his team. "No one fires. No one harms any of them. That's an order." "They'll overwhelm us," West protested. "Then we let them," Hayes said firmly. The moving humans were closer now, dozens of them, hundreds, their faces blank but their hands reaching out. Hayes held his ground, heart racing. "Hold position, no matter what happens." On the holographic displays above, Hayes could see the other teams around the world facing the same dilemma. In Beijing, soldiers were backing away. In Moscow, weapons were being raised. In London, shouts were echoing across their arena. This was it, humanity's judgment playing out simultaneously across the globe. Fight or yield, kill or be taken. The first of the advancing humans reached them, hands grasping at Hayes' suit. He didn't resist. More came, surrounding them, pressing in from all sides. "Hold," Hayes commanded as his team tensed. "Trust me." The pressure increased. They were being crushed, smothered by the weight of bodies. Hayes couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Around the world, he glimpsed flashes of other responses. Gunfire in Moscow, retreating forces in Tokyo, panic everywhere. Then he saw something else. In London, a commander was ordering weapons down. In Johannesburg, soldiers were standing their ground, allowing themselves to be engulfed. Understanding rippled through Hayes. This wasn't one test. It was many tests playing out simultaneously. The architects were measuring humanity's collective response. No single group could pass or fail alone. They would be judged together. "Stay strong." Hayes gasped as the bodies pressed tighter. "We're not alone." Darkness crept at the edges of his vision. He was losing consciousness. The last thing he saw before blackness took him was the creature watching, its hollow eyes revealing nothing of its thoughts. Hayes woke with a violent gasp. He was lying on his back, staring up at the sky, not the alien ships, but clear, bluer sky. His team was scattered around him, all alive, all stirring. And standing over them was General Peterson, looking as confused as Hayes felt. "Lieutenant Colonel," Peterson said, offering a hand. "Welcome back to the land of the living." Hayes took it, hauling himself upright. They were still in Washington, D.C., but the stone circle was gone. The frozen humans were gone. The city was alive again. People walking, traffic moving, the mundane rhythm of everyday life continuing as if nothing had happened. "The ships," Hayes said, scanning the sky. "Gone," Peterson confirmed. "Vanished about an hour ago. Same everywhere. Moscow, Beijing, London, they just disappeared." "What about," Hayes began, "the people they took?" "All back. Every single one. They're disoriented, confused, but alive." Peterson shook his head. "No one remembers a damn thing. As far as the world is concerned, they experienced some kind of mass blackout. People are calling it a solar flare, a mass hallucination, anything to explain what can't be explained." Hayes's mind raced. "But we remember—" "Not everyone," Peterson said grimly. "Just those of us who were at the sites. The military personnel, the government officials, the ones they chose to test." Hayes looked around at the ordinary people going about their lives, blissfully unaware of how close they had come to extinction. "They don't know what happened. And they never will," Peterson said firmly. "Official Story is an unprecedented cosmic event causing temporary global communications failure." "That's it?" Hayes asked incredulously. "We pretend it never happened?" Peterson's expression hardened. "What would you have us do? Tell the world we were judged by ancient aliens and barely passed their test? That would cause panic, chaos. Exactly what got us into this mess in the first place." Hayes fell silent. He understood the logic, but something felt unfinished, unresolved. "Sir," he said carefully, "they'll be back." Peterson's eyes narrowed. "What makes you say that?" Hayes stared up at the empty sky, remembering the void between stars, the weight of the architect's judgment still heavy in his mind. "Because we didn't pass. We survived. It's not the same thing." "Explain," Peterson demanded. "The test wasn't just about whether we'd kill each other to survive." Hayes said. "It was about unity, global unity. Some countries stood down. Others fought back. We weren't united. We were inconsistent. But they left us alone. For now," Hayes said, "we bought time, not victory." Peterson was silent for a long moment. Then, with a heavy sigh, he nodded toward the Pentagon in the distance. "Come with me. There's something you need to see." The war room was different now. The panic was gone, replaced by a quiet, grim determination. Large screens showed feeds from around the world. Military officials from China, Russia, the UK, India, dozens of nations, all connected in real time. "What is this?" Hayes asked. "The beginning," Peterson said. "They all remember. Hayes, every military commander, every government official who stood in those stone circles. And they all know what you know, that we're on borrowed time." On the main screen, Hayes recognized the faces, leaders he had seen on the holographic displays during the test. They had been there too. They had experienced the same judgment. "For the first time in human history," Peterson continued, "we have a common enemy, a common purpose." "Unity," Hayes whispered. "Exactly." Peterson gestured to the screens. "This meeting has been going for 6 hours. No press, no public statements. Just leaders from every major nation figuring out how to prepare humanity for what's coming." Hayes stared at the screens, hardly believing what he was seeing. Nations that had been enemies for generations were now working together, planning together. The test had changed something fundamental. "They'll be back," Hayes said again, but this time with less dread. And we need to be ready. Peterson nodded. And we will be, not as Americans or Russians or Chinese, but as humans. Hayes thought of the ancient machine in Antarctica, still broadcasting its signal to the stars. He thought of the silent ships and their terrible judgment. He thought of the word that still echoed in his mind, prove. And for the first time since the silence had fallen, he felt something like hope, because the test wasn't over. It had just begun. And next time, humanity would face it together. The creature's words lingered in Hayes' mind as he stared at the united leaders on the screen. Only the strong survive. Perhaps strength wasn't what the architects thought it was. Perhaps true strength lay not in domination or power, but in unity, in the ability to overcome division in the face of extinction. Hayes smiled grimly. The silent judgment had come, and humanity had been found wanting. But they would not be silent in return. They would speak with one voice when the ships returned, and they would prove they deserved to exist. Deep beneath the ice of Antarctica, the ancient machine pulsed once more, sending its signal into the void. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the architects listened, waiting, watching. The test continued.